Imagine a digital vault. And inside this vault is tens of billions of dollars.
Right.
But the lock on the door is this, impenetrable wall of cryptography. And the money has just sat there, completely untouched for over a decade.
Yeah.
Just waiting for a ghost to come and claim it.
It really is like the ultimate modern myth in finance and tech. And I mean, that ghost, of course, is Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right, the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And for years, people have tried to unmask this person or, group of people. But today, our mission for this deep dive is to explore a fascinating set of sources centered on a massive bombshell.
A huge one.
Yeah, because in April 2026, the New York Times published this 10,000-word investigation claiming they had finally solved it.
10,000 words.
I know, right? And they pointed the finger squarely at a 55-year-old British cryptographer named Adam Back.
And almost immediately, Adam Back, who is, the CEO of a major blockchain technology company called Blockstream, he issued a fierce public denial.
He shut it down. So our goal today is to examine the specific evidence the Times presented, analyze the gaping holes in that theory, and ultimately uncover why the true power of this entire technology might actually rely on us never knowing the truth.
Which is such a wild concept.
Okay, let's unpack this, but before we dive in, a quick ground rule for you, the listener.
Good idea.
Throughout our discussion today, we are looking purely at the facts and the academic analysis from our provided sources. We're leaving wild internet conspiracy theories at the door. We're just looking at the data.
Which is an essential boundary to set, I think.
Yeah.
Because when you are analyzing the origins of a decentralized financial network worth over $1 trillion, the signal gets lost in the noise very easily.
Oh, totally.
So if we want to understand why Adam Back's denial is so crucial, we first have to look at the incredibly compelling case that put him in the crosshairs to begin with.
We really do. Let's start with the investigation itself. It was spearheaded by journalist John Carreyrou. And if that name rings a bell, it's because he's the reporter who exposed the Theranos scandal.
Yeah, he does not deal in lightweight rumors.
Exactly. For this piece in the Times, he didn't just, interview a few old colleagues. He deployed advanced AI stylometry.
Yes, and the entire foundation of the investigation relies on this technology. AI stylometry is, it's essentially the statistical analysis of variations in literary style between one writer and another.
Right.
Carreyrou's team fed a neural network massive amounts of Satoshi Nakamoto's known writings. So the original 2008 Bitcoin white paper, early forum posts, raw emails.
Just a ton of text.
Yeah, a massive data set. Then they compared those data sets against the public and private writings of hundreds of candidates in the cryptography space.
Now, I want to pause on that because I think people hear stylometry and assume it just means, looking for someone who uses the same vocabulary words.
Right, like finding someone who says indubitably a lot.
Exactly. But AI takes us to a completely different level, right? How does a machine actually measure human writing?
What's fascinating here is how granular the AI can get when mapping human cognition. The software isn't just looking at the words you consciously choose.
Okay.
It builds a mathematical graph of your subconscious structural syntax. It measures the average distance between your nouns and verbs.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it looks at the cognitive load of your sentences, like how you instinctively build dependent clauses when explaining complex math.
That is wild.
And it basically strips away what you are trying to say and maps the deeply ingrained neurological habits of how you construct a thought.
So it's finding a linguistic fingerprint at a crime scene, except the weapon is just really specific grammar habits.
That is a perfect way to put it.
And according to the sources, when this AI analyzed Adam Back, it found striking idiosyncrasies shared perfectly with Satoshi. We're talking about hyper-specific quirks here.
Very specific.
Both of them always used exactly 2 spaces after a period. They both utilized a highly unusual blended mix of British and American spelling in the same paragraph.
Which is rare.
Super rare. They shared strange hyphen usage. And the AI even caught verbatim phrases. In separate, entirely unrelated contexts, both Satoshi and Adam Back wrote the exact phrase, "I'm better with code than words."
Yeah, and one linguist consulted for the piece looked at the statistical overlay and claimed it was a 99.5% match.
99.5.
Right. In the realm of data science, that is considered overwhelming probability. But the Times didn't stop at linguistic analysis. They cross-referenced those findings with behavioral timelines.
So digital footprints.
Precisely. Satoshi Nakamoto was highly active in cryptography forums starting in 2008, communicating regularly, publishing code, tweaking the network.
Very hands-on.
Yeah. Then, in 2011, Satoshi abruptly announced they were moving on to other things and vanished completely.
Just ghosted.
Just ghosted. And the investigation notes that during that exact 2.5-year window, Adam Back's usually prolific public presence on those exact same forums noticeably dipped.
He went quiet.
He went relatively quiet. And then, almost immediately after Satoshi posted his final goodbye in 2011, Adam Back reappeared and became highly active again.
It's the whole Batman and Bruce Wayne are never in the same room phenomenon. It looks incredibly suspicious on paper, but, if you're listening to this, you're probably wondering what I was wondering. Why did the New York Times even think to point an incredibly expensive AI at Adam Back in the first place?
Right, out of millions of programmers.
Exactly. There are millions of programmers in the world, and the answer is that Adam Back literally built the engine that makes Bitcoin run.
Yeah, to understand his role, we really have to rewind the clock to the early 1990s and look at a group known as the cypherpunks.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this was an active global mailing list made up of brilliant cryptographers, hackers, and privacy activists. Their core philosophy was that strong cryptography was the only way to defend individual privacy and resist government overreach in the digital age.
Which was pretty ahead of its time for the 90s.
Very. And Adam Back, who holds a doctorate in distributed systems, was a foundational voice in that community.
He was a heavyweight. And in 1997, more than a decade before Bitcoin even existed, Adam Back invented a system called Hashcash.
Right.
Let's make this concrete, because Hashcash is an absolute stroke of genius. Back in the late 90s, email spam was becoming an existential threat to the internet.
Oh, it was off.
Spammers could send 1 million junk emails for free.
Yeah.
Back wanted a way to make it computationally expensive to send 1 million junk emails, but functionally free to send just one.
So he needed to create what we call an anti-Sybil mechanism using a cryptographic function called SHA-1.
Wait, back up. Anti-Sybil mechanism, SHA-1. For listeners who aren't deep in the crypto weeds, let's untangle that. What exactly is a Sybil attack?
Sure. A Sybil attack is a concept in computer science where a single attacker creates a massive number of fake, cheap identities to overwhelm a network.
Okay.
Imagine one person putting on 1,000 different hats to vote 1,000 times in a local election. That's a Sybil attack.
That makes sense.
To stop it, you have to make putting on a hat cost something. So Adam Back used the SHA-1 algorithm, which is a one-way mathematical function.
Meaning it's like baking a cake. It's really easy to look at a cake and confirm it's baked, but it's mathematically impossible to unbake it back into raw eggs and flour.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. Hashcash used this math to create a system called proof of work.
Okay, proof of work.
Before your computer could send an email, the Hashcash software essentially forced your processor to solve a complex mathematical puzzle. It was like a digital lottery, where it had to guess a random number over and over until it found a specific answer.
So it's making your computer do a little bit of heavy lifting.
Right.
For you, sending an email to a friend, your computer runs that lottery in a fraction of a millisecond. You don't even blink.
You wouldn't even notice.
But for a spammer trying to send 10 million emails, that tiny fraction of a millisecond multiplies. The required computing power scales up instantly, and their servers would literally melt down trying to run the math. It made spam economically impossible.
And that concept, forcing a computer to expend verifiable energy, to do work, to prove it, has the right to participate in a network that became the foundational mechanism for preventing abuse in any decentralized system.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If you go read the original October 2008 Bitcoin white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto, he explicitly cites Adam Back's Hashcash.
Right there in the text.
In the paper, Satoshi explains that to make a digital currency work without a bank, you need a distributed peer-to-peer timestamp server.
Which is a highly technical way of saying, well, we need a way for everyone to agree on what time it is and who sent what money when without relying on a central clock or a central bank.
Right. Imagine a public town square. Instead of everyone looking up at one giant clock tower controlled by the mayor, which, the mayor can manipulate everyone in the squares, constantly comparing their own watches with the people standing next to them.
I like that.
If someone claims it's 3:00 p.m., but everyone else's watch says 1:00 p.m., the crowd rejects the lie. But to make that town square system work digitally, Satoshi wrote that the network needed a proof-of-work system, quote, similar to Adam Back's Hashcash.
That is the smoking gun for the times. Back built the exact mechanism Satoshi needed.
It paints an overwhelmingly compelling picture. You have a British cryptographer with the exact technical background in distributed systems.
Right.
You have an AI mapping subconscious linguistic structures to a 99.5% certainty.
Yeah.
You have behavioral timelines that perfectly overlap. And the suspect literally invented the underlying consensus engine cited in the foundational document.
It looks bad. I mean, it looks like a closed case.
But if he built the engine and the timelines match and the AI says it's him, why is his own company putting out press releases fiercely denying it?
Good question.
Immediately after the article dropped in April 2026, Adam Back went on X, formerly Twitter, and stated point blank, "I'm not Satoshi. The rest is a combination of coincidence and similar phrases from people with similar experience and interests." And Blockstream released a statement backing him entirely, so we have to look critically at the gaping holes in the times theory.
Right. And our sources provide several critical pieces of counter evidence. Let's start with the historical emails.
Okay.
During various legal proceedings involving the crypto space over the years, early private emails between Satoshi and other cypherpunks were entered into the public record.
Right, people had to hand them over.
Yeah. And on August 20, 2008, months before the white paper was even published, Satoshi Nakamoto emailed Adam Back privately to discuss the project and let him know he was citing Hashcash.
Okay, wait.
And in that specific email chain, Adam Back actually points Satoshi toward another cypherpunk's project, Wei Dai's B-Money.
Which completely breaks the logic of the Times investigation.
It really does.
Think about this from a human perspective for a second. Why would an evil genius trying to meticulously hide their tracks email themselves?
They wouldn't.
That makes zero sense. You're telling me Adam Back, a master cryptographer, set up a fake identity just to email his real identity, to casually mention someone else's work, operating on the assumption that this private email might be uncovered in a lawsuit 20 years later.
It's just entirely too convoluted.
Way too convoluted.
And, that 99.5% linguistic match, it has been heavily scrutinized by other experts in the space.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Analysts like Nick Carter have pointed out a massive flaw in relying on stylometry for this specific demographic.
Why is that?
Well, the British and American cypherpunk community in the 1990s and early 2000s was a tiny, incredibly tight-knit echo chamber.
Right. They were all reading the same academic papers and debating on the same mailing lists every single day.
Precisely. When you have a small, isolated group of highly educated programmers with similar backgrounds constantly debating distributed systems in text format for a decade, they naturally begin to mirror each other's language.
Oh, wow.
It's a deeply researched linguistic phenomenon. We see it in physical geography all the time.
So they just started sounding like each other.
Yeah. Other famous cypherpunks active on those boards, people like Hal Finney, Nick Szabo, and Wei Dai, they also share many of these exact same linguistic traits.
Really?
Yeah, the same double spaces, the same coding idiosyncrasies. What the AI identified wasn't necessarily a unique fingerprint.
It's a regional dialect.
Exactly.
It's a regional dialect of nerds. When you view it through that lens, the AI isn't finding Satoshi, it's just identifying what a 1990s cypherpunk sounds like.
Exactly.
But for me, I mean, the absolute biggest hole in the theory is the money. The billions.
Oh, yeah. The wallet.
Satoshi Nakamoto's original wallets contain roughly 1.1 million Bitcoin, and those coins have never moved. We are talking about tens of billions of dollars of liquid wealth.
It's staggering.
Now, Adam Back is an active public CEO. He goes to conferences, he raises capital, he runs a highly competitive business.
Yeah.
The sheer absurdity of an active tech CEO sitting on tens of billions of dollars and never touching a single cent of it to fund his own company or secure his family's legacy, it completely defies human nature.
It really does. And that brings us to the harsh academic and cryptographic reality of this entire debate. Stylometry, AI syntax trees, overlapping timelines, all of that is purely circumstantial evidence.
Right.
In a court of law, maybe a skilled lawyer uses it to establish reasonable doubt or suspicion. But in the world of cryptography, circumstantial evidence is entirely meaningless.
Because math doesn't care about your grammar habits.
Exactly. Let's define public key cryptography simply. Think of a Bitcoin address like a transparent mailbox in the middle of that town square we mentioned earlier.
Okay, a glass mailbox.
Right. Everyone can see exactly how much money is inside the mailbox. But to open it and move the money, you need a highly specific mathematical private key.
And nobody has that.
The cryptography behind Bitcoin's early wallets remains unbroken. If you are Satoshi, you possess the private keys to those 1.1 million Bitcoin. You can cryptographically sign a message proving ownership in a matter of seconds, without even spending the funds.
So there's a definitive way to prove it.
Always. Until a human being actually does that, every single theory, including a 10,000-word New York Times investigation, is nothing more than a guess.
Man, if we know that Adam Back almost certainly isn't Satoshi, and that stylometry is likely just a bunch of people speaking the same internet dialect, it shifts the entire conversation.
It really does.
It makes me wonder if we are fundamentally missing the point by hunting this person down. What if the anonymity isn't a cover-up? What if the anonymity is the actual innovation?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact argument Adam Back himself makes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Back has stated repeatedly over the years that he does not know who Satoshi is, and more importantly, he believes it is vital to the survival of the network that we never find out.
Vital to the survival.
Yes. He argues that Satoshi disappearing is the exact catalyst that allowed Bitcoin to evolve into a mathematically scarce digital commodity, rather than just another tech startup.
Okay, but how does that work in practice? Why does a system benefit from its creator becoming a ghost?
It removes the fatal vulnerability of human leadership. Studies on leaderless movements in sociology and decentralized economics show that when a network lacks a centralized founder, it becomes incredibly resilient to external attack.
Because there's nobody to target.
Exactly. If Satoshi Nakamoto were a known person, let's say it was Adam Back, governments could subpoena him. Regulators could pressure him to change the code to comply with local financial laws. He could be sued, threatened, or coerced.
He's a single point of failure.
Right. Furthermore, you avoid the cult of personality. The protocol doesn't rely on the whims, political opinions, or the moral failings of its creator.
I want to use a different metaphor here because we usually talk about cutting off the head of the snake. But a decentralized network isn't a snake.
What is it then?
It's more like a mycelium network, a massive underground fungal system in a forest.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Think of a node, which is just an individual computer running the Bitcoin software anywhere in the world. Think of that like a single mushroom sprouting above ground.
Right.
If a government steps on one mushroom, or even burns down half the forest, the underground network effortlessly routes resources around the damage and sprouts somewhere else. There is no central brain to destroy.
Which is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. When Satoshi was around in those early days, people naturally deferred to his authority on the message board.
Sure, he was the guy.
But by walking away in 2011, he forced the community to take ownership of the mycelium network themselves. It was an immaculate conception for a digital asset. The creator gave it away and vanished, turning it into a public digital utility.
Think about any massive tech giant today. If the CEO of a major Silicon Valley company has a massive public scandal, the stock tanks the next morning. The board panics. The value of the network is tied directly to the ego and the image of the human running it. But Bitcoin has no CEO. It has no PR department to handle scandals.
Done.
It survives purely on math and consensus. If a core developer leaves, another steps in. That's why the cypherpunks fought so hard for privacy in the first place. They knew that for decentralized money to survive state-level pressure, there couldn't be a CEO to put in handcuffs.
Exactly. It forces the world to trust the code, rather than trusting the person who wrote it.
So what does this all mean? It means we've spent more than a decade chasing a ghost, when the ghost intentionally wanted us to look at the machine he left behind.
Well said.
Adam Back is, without a doubt, a technological visionary. His invention of Hashcash in 1997 paved the way for decentralized consensus. Without his proof-of-work lottery system, the mining of Bitcoin just wouldn't exist.
Definitely not.
But based on his own consistent denials, the total lack of cryptographic proof, and the glaring inconsistencies in the AI's logic, he is almost certainly not Satoshi Nakamoto.
Right. And the true genius of Satoshi wasn't necessarily inventing every single piece of cryptography from scratch. It was the brilliance of acting as an architect.
Putting the pieces together.
Yeah. He took pre-existing parts like Adam Back's Hashcash, Weidai's B-Money, and public key cryptography, and assembled them into a beautifully balanced, functional peer-to-peer system. And then he had the ultimate wisdom to walk away.
It really is the ultimate mic drop in the history of technology.
This raises an important question, though, one that goes beyond the code, beyond the stylometry, and cuts straight to the core of human nature.
It does. I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over. We talked about how incredibly difficult it is to stay anonymous under the threat of modern surveillance and AI sleuthing.
Really impossible.
And we always assume that Satoshi hasn't moved that 1.1 million Bitcoin out of this noble philosophical dedication to a leaderless movement. But think about what that actually requires on a human level.
Yeah, the restraint.
What if the greatest innovation of Bitcoin wasn't the code itself? What if it wasn't the cryptography or the decentralized network?
Right.
What if the absolute greatest achievement in this entire story was the sheer, almost inhuman psychological restraint required to possess ultimate world-changing wealth and power and consciously choose every single day for decades never to wield it? Is that level of self-control even human?
It is a question that challenges everything we know about power, ego, and the limits of human discipline.
It absolutely does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your minds open, keep looking for the mechanism behind the mystery, and remember that sometimes the most powerful force in the room is the one you can't see. We'll catch you next time.